Today, I want to share with you why going from your first million to your second, why having the money in the bank account that you think you want, and why money as an entrepreneur, as you have exponential success, is completely different than what you expected. I'm Scott Oldford. I talk about entrepreneurship, talk about investing, and one big part of that is money. Let's dive in.
10 years ago, if you told me that, I'd be like telling people about money. I'd be like, well, that's going to be crazy. I probably wouldn't listen to that advice. It's been a really interesting journey, and hopefully I can share some valuable stuff today that's really just allows you, maybe for more than anything else, to take the pressure off. I'm 31 now. I was 21 10 years ago, obviously, some simple math. And I was $1 million in debt, probably to the time I was about 23 or 24, around $1 million in debt. You know, my net worth is above 25 million at this point. So 10 years. And now obviously net worth is very different than, net worth is a weird thing. It took me 10 years to go there. And that felt like a long time. Like when I was in it, it felt like a long time. And looking back, it's like, oh, that was like a short period of time. And here's the interesting thing. If I looked at like when I was a millionaire or when I was first a millionaire, and what I mean by that is like actually not like $1 million a year, because that's not, I don't really believe that that's necessarily, a 7-figure business. It takes a long time to become a millionaire. Like it generally takes about $4 to $6 million to become a millionaire if you play your cards right. If I look at that amount of time versus how easy it was to go from $1 million to 2 million, or from like 2 million to 10 million, or even, 10 million to 30 million. Well, like 10 million to 30 million happened like that. Like literally in 9 months, the exponential at a level. And I feel like I'm in exponential right now. And obviously at a certain point that slows down because you can't keep doing that forever. It felt really slow, and it can feel really slow at the beginning when it's just month after month after month. And generally your bank account doesn't really go up that much. I think it's something that needs to have a lot more attention, because I think most entrepreneurs feel like they're like really doing something wrong. And like, they're getting all the, maybe their social media has grown, or maybe their business, the revenue's grown, or they're like, oh, well, last year I did 200,000. This year I did 400,000, but like, why don't I have any more money? I think like no one ever really told me when I was at that level, the first time around. And the first time around, like, as you said, I was a teenager. So I kind of understood this from a different kind of place. And as a teenager, you don't have much money to spend. There's not much things you can spend money on. It's like food, you know what I mean? It really is. I have so many entrepreneurs that are literally multiple 7-figure entrepreneurs that I mentor, and they come to me and they're like, I have just the same amount of money I had than when I was doing 400,000 a year. A lot of the times people don't realize that that's like a normal part of the journey, and that wealth creation is exponential, even quantum, but it doesn't look like that when you're building the foundation of it. Every time that you double a business, let's say you go from 100,000 to 200,000. Well, 100,000 to 200,000 is the easiest doubling there is. So then let's say you go from 250 to 500. That's probably the second easiest doubling. And so each doubling sort of makes things more difficult, because there's only so much you can double before you can't double anymore, or you have to make massive changes in the way that you do business. And so what you generally will find is what you have to do to go from 60,000 a year to 250,000 a year, you have to rewrite your whole business model to go from 250 to 750. And then if you want to go from 750 to 3 million, you got to rewrite your business model again. You got to realize that when you're building a business, so if you're going to do high growth, speed makes it so that you make mistakes. The faster you go, the more mistakes you make. Every time that you make a mistake, and I don't mean mistake in a bad way. Oh, look, we could have done it that way and it would have worked better that way. We lost some energy flow from that, right? Which is money. So when you're growing something quickly, you lose that energy flow because you're kind of going more quickly. And so that makes it so that you probably lose 10 to 20% of your profit right from the get-go. And then you pay yourself, you upgrade your life, you make decisions that you may have, made a little bit differently. You have to pay taxes in most places in the world. Let's say you get to 7 figures in 2 years, even with good profit margins. The most you're going to be able to keep is 200 grand, maybe a bit more if you're really just unless you have a massive unfair advantage, meaning you have a massive audience or expertise where you're the best literally the best person in the world. Not like your little community thinks you're the best in the world. I mean, like literally you are you are a unicorn when it comes to being able to be the best in the world. It's very rare for someone to go from $500,000 to $1 million or $250,000 to $1 million and have much more than $200,000 left in the bank. So people get to seven figures and they find that's very depressing for them because it's like, well, look at all this work. Look at everything I did and I still don't have any money. So this is where burnout starts to come in. This is where, because if we view something in our life as being an obligation instead of an opportunity, and we do that for a long period of time and we're not in alignment, we burn out. We blow up our business. I've been there multiple times. I understand blowing up a business. I have a methodology called the harmony triangle. Mm-hmm. And if you're not flowing enough back to you from your business, which is, well, there's not enough reward in this. And reward could be anything. Reward could be money. Reward could be time off. Reward could be time with your family. That business is not going to work because the entire energetics of that business are going to be out. So you've got to realize that most entrepreneurs make money by either selling a business or by doing something for a long period of time. What we have is an industry that has very high potential, high growth, meaning I can hustle hard, get a lot of growth, but people don't realize that just because you grow a business to say seven figures, don't mean you're going to have that much money in the bank account unless you keep having that business for 4 or 5 years minimum. Or you build something, and keep in mind, when you build something to sell, it's a lot harder to build than if you're just going to build it for cash flow. They're two very different things. And so most people won't do the low growth thing, right? Because the low growth thing is more sellable, more stable, also less reliant on your energy because you have energy and your business has an energy imprint. If you're flowing all your energy to the business and the business is flowing energy back to it, well, of course, that's not going to work. It's not going to be in alignment. And on the other side of it, I think people have unrealistic expectations because no one tells them. Because every person's like, well, you can scale the seven figures. Okay, cool. But you're really not going to have that money until maybe year 4 of having a 7-figure business. If you reinvest that money into the business after 3 years, 4 years of being at $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million a year, you can have a very stable business that allows you to have $500,000, $1 million in cash flow on a yearly basis. What people do is they take too much money from the business too quickly, or they scale up everything because they want to look cool, or they're trying to prove to other people, or they're trying to prove to themselves, or they're trying to prove to their parents, or they're trying to prove to their 16-year-old self, or they feel like they deserve because they did the hard work, right? There's a level of entitlement that occurs. Not a bad thing to go and have the things you want and do that. But I think having the understanding that if you want to be wealthy, unless you have inheritance or you win the lottery, wealth takes 15 to 20 years to start, not to be done, to start. That's hard for people to imagine. And it also is something where people get scared of that because they're like, well, what's my right decision? And so then my return to that is get back to helping people. And wealth will happen by itself if you continually get better and better and better at what you do. You continually deliver more and more value. You continually help more and more and more over time. Everything else you don't have to worry about. And so a lot of the time when we get into wealth creation and people kind of thinking about this stuff, people spend way too much time thinking about, well, what am I going to invest in? Or what am I going to do this? What am I going to do that 10 years into the future, or 15 years in the future? Or they buy things way too early in their life. They upgrade their lifestyle. The most broke people are people that do 7 figures. The people that do 1 to 3 million a year are the most broke people. Most people that make $250,000 a year in their business have more money than the person making $1 million. And that's both because they're investing money into the business, but also they go and they buy their supercar or their Tesla. They go and upgrade their house. They go and start travel. I have nothing against this. I'm just saying that held off on it for 3 extra years. You'd be able to do all of that. And those things wouldn't make it so that if your next launch didn't work, you're screwed. A lot of people build 7-figure unsustainable businesses. And then they also don't have the ability to look long term because now you just traded in the 6-figure hamster wheel for the 7-figure hamster wheel, which is not actually, it's a little more cushy. It's not really that fun. A lot of first-time entrepreneurs end up there, especially when this online industry, you can grow a business faster than almost any other business. It has a lot of high growth. And I think people don't realize that that's not normal. That only happens when you're in a high growth industry. You can't go to brick and mortar and scale a business 300% a year. It doesn't work. That's not real. That's not a thing. I think it's really important for people to realize that increase your time horizon and having some level of delayed gratification and understanding where you want the business to flow the money back to you, that really sets people up in a totally different way. And I wish I had somebody in my life to be able to help me build a blueprint around what that might look like. Because, I remember my first $1 million launch was in 2016. I didn't know what to fucking do with that money. I had no idea. I made that type of money over periods of time. but I'm talking like in a week. And then I remember actually it was 4 years ago, I did the $1 million month in cash with no launches. I was just like, what is going on? And I remember this was 2018. That is partially why this occurs. And I think people have unrealistic expectations. And I think it's also just because, the advertising that people like me or, people that are kind of the leaders, they don't put the asterisks next to it. I think there needs to be at least some level of like, hey, this is what you're kind of getting yourself into. I think it's important.